For more original stories, subscribe to Audio Tales. Now, let's begin this one. The courtroom was cold, not in temperature, but in atmosphere. It was the kind of chill that seeps into your bones, a sterile indifference to the human dramas unfolding within its walls. I sat at the plaintiff's table. My lawyer, Mr. Henderson, a portly man with kind eyes, shuffling papers beside me. But my attention wasn't on him, or on the stern-faced judge peering down from her elevated bench. It was on my daughter, Lily. My Lily. She sat across the aisle, ramrod straight, her dark hair, so like her mother's, pulled back severely. She was 22 now, a young woman, but in her defiant posture, in the hard set of her jaw, I still saw the wounded child she'd become. She hadn't looked at me once since the proceedings began an hour ago. Not a glance, not a flicker. It was as if I were a ghost, an unwelcome specter in the courtroom of her life, a place where she was clearly drawing a new, firm boundary that excluded me entirely. Each refusal to meet my gaze was a fresh stab in a heart already riddled with old wounds. We were here because of her grandmother's will, my mother's will, a small cottage by the sea, a place filled with memories. Memories I cherished, memories Lily apparently wanted to erase, or at least possess without any attachment to me. She was contesting my role as executor, claiming I was unfit, that I wouldn't act in her best interest. Unfit. The word echoed the unspoken accusations I'd seen in her eyes for the past 6 years, ever since Clara, my wife, her mother, had passed away. Lily believed I had failed her mother, that my actions or inactions had contributed to Clara's unhappiness, perhaps even hastened her end. She had constructed a narrative where I was the villain, and she, the righteous avenger of her mother's memory. The silence between us had grown from a crack to a chasm, and now, here we were, battling over bricks and mortar when all I wanted was to bridge the vast, aching space that separated us. Mr. Henderson cleared his throat, a gentle nudge. Mr. Davies, they're about to call for your statement regarding the upkeep of the property. I nodded, my mouth dry. Right. Upkeep. Financials. Logistics. The mundane details of a life torn apart. How could I talk about leaking roofs and property taxes when my own house, the house of my heart, was in such ruin? I remembered Clara, her laughter like wind chimes, her hands always busy, either in the garden, with her paints, or holding mine. She had been the sun around which both Lily and I orbited. When she got sick, the light began to dim, slowly, painfully. And in those last few months, as the illness tightened its cruel grip, things had become complicated. There were hushed conversations, strained silences, decisions made that Lily, then a sensitive 16-year-old, had misinterpreted, had woven into her tapestry of my supposed neglect. I could see the courtroom, but superimposed over it were images of Clara's pale face on the pillow, her hand, frail but insistent, pressing a sealed envelope into mine. Not until you absolutely have to, David, she'd whispered, her voice raspy. For Lily, when the time is right, or when it's the only way. The envelope. It was in the inside pocket of my jacket, resting against my chest. A fragile weight, a silent bomb. Clara's last letter. A letter she'd written to Lily in her final weeks, entrusting it to me. I hadn't known its full contents, only that it was her truth, her final words to our daughter. For 6 years, I had kept it, honoring her wish. The time had never seemed right. Every attempt I'd made to reach Lily, to explain, to just talk, had been met with a wall of anger and accusations, often parroting phrases and sentiments I suspected had been fed to her by Clara's sister, Diane, a woman who had always viewed me with a certain disdain, and who, I was sure, had helped cement Lily's negative perception of me after Clara was gone. Showing Lily the letter then, in the heat of her raw grief and anger, might have seemed like a desperate, self-serving ploy. So I'd waited. But now, watching Lily's lawyer paint me as incompetent, uncaring, even grasping, I felt a cold wave of despair. This wasn't just about a cottage. This was about my very essence as a father, as a man, being irrevocably destroyed in my daughter's eyes. Maybe this was the only way Clara had foreseen. Lily's lawyer, a sharp young woman named Ms. Albright, was speaking. And it is our contention, Your Honor, that Mr. Davies's past financial decisions that caused considerable distress to his late wife and hardship to the family, demonstrate a pattern that makes him unsuitable to manage an asset intended for Miss Davies's future security. Distress? Hardship? My mind reeled. Was that how Clara had portrayed it to Lily? Or was this Lily's interpretation, amplified by Diane's poison? The room seemed to tilt. I saw Lily nod curtly in agreement with her lawyer's statement, a small, definitive gesture that felt like a hammer blow. She truly believed it. She believed I had hurt her mother through financial carelessness. The accusation hung in the air, thick and suffocating. My own lawyer was good, methodical. He presented my financial records, showed my responsible handling of affairs since Clara's passing, my attempts to ensure Lily was provided for, despite our estrangement. But it felt like fighting shadows. How could I defend myself against perceptions, against a narrative woven from grief and misinformation? The judge, a woman named Harrison, with an air of tired patience, looked from Ms. Albright to me. Mr. Davies, do you have a response to the specific claim regarding past financial decisions impacting your late wife? My heart hammered. This was it. I could go through the motions, deny, present my own dry figures. Or I could try to reach my daughter, really reach her, for what felt like the last time. The letter felt like a burning coal in my pocket. I took a deep breath. Your Honor, I began, my voice a little unsteady. The narrative presented by my daughter, through her counsel, is incomplete. It's a version of events seen through the prism of understandable grief and, perhaps, misunderstanding. There are things about her mother's life, about our life together, that Lily doesn't know. Things Clara wanted her to know, but only when the time was right. Lily scoffed audibly, a small, bitter sound that cut me to the quick. She muttered something to Miss Albright, shaking her head, her disdain clear even from across the room. "Do you have evidence to substantiate this, Mr. Davies?" Judge Harrison asked, her gaze neutral but questioning. I hesitated for a fraction of a second. This was a courtroom, not a family therapy session. But it was also the only arena Lily had allowed me into. My hand went to my jacket pocket. "I do, Your Honor. I have a letter. A letter from Clara, my late wife, written to Lily. Shortly before she passed, she entrusted it to me." Miss Albright was on her feet. "Objection, Your Honor. This is highly irregular. We have no knowledge of this letter. It could be anything, self-serving, fabricated." Lily was staring at me now, finally. Her eyes, so like Clara's, were wide, not with softness, but with a mixture of shock and accusation. "You have a letter? From Mom? And you've kept it from me all these years?" Her voice, when it came, was low, trembling with fury. I was honoring her wishes, Lily, I said, my voice pleading, directed at her, not the judge. She asked me to give it to you when the time was right, or when it was the only way to make you understand. Make me understand what? She shot back, her voice rising. Understand why you let her down? Why you made her miserable? That's enough, Miss Davies, Judge Harrison interjected, her voice firm. To me, she said, Mr. Davies, while I appreciate the personal nature of this, its admissibility here is questionable unless it directly pertains to your suitability as executor or the financial matters at hand. What is the nature of this letter? My mind raced. How to explain without revealing its contents prematurely, without betraying Clara's intimate words in this cold setting? Your Honor, it explains the circumstances Ms. Albright referred to. It explains the financial decisions and the distress from Clara's own perspective. It provides the context that has been missing for my daughter. And yes, I believe it directly impacts the perception of my character and my ability to act in her best interest, because it reveals the truth of my actions concerning her mother, actions taken out of love and protection, not neglect or incompetence. The judge considered this, her fingers steepled. Lily was watching me, her face a mask of conflicting emotions, anger, suspicion, and beneath it I desperately hoped a tiny flicker of curiosity, of doubt in her own long-held convictions. I'll allow a brief recess, Judge Harrison declared. Mr. Davies, you may share this letter with your daughter and her counsel. We will then determine if and how it is relevant to these proceedings. But I caution you, this court is not the place to litigate family grievances that extend beyond the scope of the estate. Relief, sharp and sudden, washed over me, quickly followed by a surge of trepidation. The moment had arrived. The letter was coming out. But what if it made things worse? What if Lily refused to read it, or read it, and still chose to believe her own version? During the recess, Mr. Henderson and I approached Lily and Ms. Albright in the sterile corridor outside the courtroom. Lily stood with her arms crossed, her expression stony. Ms. Albright looked wary. Lily, I began, my voice gentle. I held out the slightly worn, cream-colored envelope. Her mother's familiar handwriting, though weakened by illness, was on the front. For my dearest Lily. She looked at the envelope as if it were a viper. I don't want it. Lily, please, I urged. This is from your mother. Her words, her truth. Don't you want to know what she had to say to you? Ms. Albright stepped forward slightly. My client is under no obligation to read something that has been conveniently produced at this late stage, Mr. Davies. Conveniently? I felt a flash of anger. I've held this for 6 years, respecting her mother's timing. This is anything but convenient for me. It's heartbreaking to have to do it this way. My gaze locked with Lily's. She loved you more than anything, Lily. Don't you think she deserves to be heard in her own words, without anyone else's filter? For a long moment, Lily just stared at the envelope in my hand. Her jaw worked. I saw the battle raging within her, the ingrained distrust of me, the anger, but also, perhaps, the undeniable pull of her mother's final message. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, her resolve seemed to waver. Her eyes, for the first time that day, held a flicker of something other than animosity. It might have been pain or confusion, or the dawning, terrifying possibility that what she believed to be true might not be. She took a shaky breath. Her hand, trembling slightly, reached out and took the envelope. She didn't look at me. She clutched it tightly, her knuckles white. I'll read it, she said, her voice barely a whisper. alone. She turned and walked towards a quiet alcove at the end of the corridor, Ms. Albright hesitating for a moment before following her at a respectful distance. I stood there, my heart pounding, watching her go. Mr. Henderson put a reassuring hand on my arm. "You did the right thing, David. Whatever happens now, you gave her the truth." I wasn't so sure. The truth could heal, but it could also shatter. I had just handed my daughter a key to a past she never knew. A past that involved not just me, but the mother she idolized. And I had no idea what she would find when she opened that door. The next few minutes, as I waited for Lily to read Clara's last words, felt like an eternity, each second stretching out, filled with a potent mixture of hope and dread. The rising tension had reached its peak. Now all that was left was the fall, and I prayed it wouldn't be into an even deeper abyss. The alcove where Lily had retreated was just out of direct sight, but I could see her silhouette against the frosted window. Ms. Albright stood a few feet away, giving her space. As minutes ticked by, each one heavier than the last, I found myself pacing, a short, restless back and forth in the corridor, my own lawyer watching me with a sympathetic expression. What was in that letter? Clara had been a private woman, especially about her deepest struggles. She had always tried to shield Lily, to present a brave face even when I knew she was crumbling inside. Had she finally laid bare her vulnerabilities, her secrets, in those final pages? I thought back to the time before Clara's illness, the years when Lily was younger. We'd been happy, hadn't we? Or had I been blind to a deeper current of unhappiness in Clara? A current Lily had somehow sensed and blamed me for? The accusation about financial decisions causing distress. It gnawed at me. There was an incident, yes, a significant one, years ago. An investment Clara had been passionate about, something she'd poured her inheritance from her own father into, against my cautious advice. It had gone bad, disastrously so. We'd lost a substantial amount of money that was meant to be a safety net, perhaps even for Lily's future education fund. Clara had been devastated, blaming herself, falling into a quiet depression. For months, I had never blamed her, not once. I had taken on extra work, juggled finances, tried to shield her from the worst of the fallout, and certainly tried to shield Lily, who was just a child then, from the stress of it all. Could Clara, in her own pain and perhaps shame, have inadvertently let Lily believe I was the one responsible for that period of hardship? Or had Diane twisted it? The thought that Clara might have allowed me to carry that unspoken blame was a painful one, yet I also knew Clara's fierce pride, her difficulty in admitting mistakes, especially if she felt they'd impacted her child. Maybe the letter was her way of finally setting that record straight. I saw movement. Lily was walking back towards us, Ms. Albright at her side. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't read her expression from this distance. Not yet. Was it the same cold anger? Or something new? As she drew closer, I saw that the letter was still clutched in her hand, now looking slightly crumpled. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. She had been crying. Not the angry tears I'd seen threaten before, but the deep, shuddering sobs of someone whose world had been shaken to its core. She stopped a few feet in front of me. For a long moment, she just looked at me, truly looked at me, for the first time in what felt like an eternity. Her eyes, mirrors of her mother's, were filled with a raw, bewildered pain. The anger was gone, replaced by a profound, aching confusion. "Dad?" she whispered, the word tentative, foreign on her tongue after so long. It wasn't an accusation, not a demand. It was a question, soft, and broken. My own eyes welled up. That single word from her lips was like a balm on a 6-year-old wound. "Ms. Albright spoke first, her voice much softer now. "Your Honor, my client and I have read the letter. It casts a significantly different light on matters. We may need to reconsider our position." When Judge Harrison reconvened the session, the atmosphere in the courtroom had shifted, palpably. Lily sat beside her lawyer, no longer rigid and defiant, but slumped, her gaze fixed on the letter in her lap. "Ms. Albright," the judge began, "what is the status?" "Your Honor," Ms. Albright said, rising, "the letter from the late Mrs. Davies to her daughter Lily provides substantial personal context regarding the family's past, particularly certain financial hardships and the circumstances surrounding them. It clarifies Mr. Davies's role in those events in a way that was previously unknown to my client." She glanced at Lily, who nodded almost imperceptibly, her eyes still downcast. "While the contents are deeply personal, and my client would prefer they not be read into the public record, she acknowledges their significance." The judge looked at Lily. "Miss Davies, has this letter changed your perspective on your father's suitability as executor?" Lily took a shaky breath. She lifted her head, and her gaze found mine. This time, there was no animosity, only a profound, heartbreaking sorrow, and something else, a dawning understanding, a flicker of the daughter. I remembered. "Yes, Your Honor," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "It has. It's changed. Everything." She looked down at the letter again. "My mother. She explains things I never knew, about sacrifices, about mistakes she made, about how my dad, how he protected us." Her voice broke on the last words. I had to know what Clara had written, what truths had finally broken through Lily's wall. Later, much later, Lily would let me read it, her hand resting on mine as I did. But in that moment, seeing the raw impact on her face was enough. Clara's letter, as I would come to learn, was a confession, a plea for understanding, and an act of profound love. She had written about the failed investment, taking full responsibility for the decision and the subsequent financial strain. She confessed her shame and her inability to face that shame openly at the time, especially to Lily. She wrote about how I, David, had worked tirelessly, without a word of blame, to recover their losses, how I'd quietly absorbed the stress and shielded both of them from the true extent of the disaster. She admitted that in her own distress, she might have said things, or allowed things to be inferred, that painted me in a negative light, especially to her sister Diane, and, by extension, to Lily. She hadn't meant to, not maliciously, but her own guilt had clouded her judgment. She also wrote about her illness, about her fears for Lily, about how she knew I would always protect our daughter. She explained certain decisions we'd made during her illness, decisions Lily had seen as me being controlling or distant, were actually her wishes, her attempts to manage her own decline with dignity, requests I had honored even when it pained me. She urged Lily to see me not as the distant, failing figure she had imagined, but as the constant, loving man who had been her rock, even when she, Clara, had faltered. She asked for Lily's forgiveness for her own silence, for her own mistakes, and begged her to find her way back to me. "Your father is a good man, Lilybug," she'd written, using her childhood nickname for our daughter. "A better man than I perhaps deserved at times. He has weathered storms for us both, silently. Don't let my shadows keep you from his light." The impact of those words on Lily had clearly been devastating and, I hoped, liberating. The mother she had idolized was human, flawed, and had loved her enough to finally share that flawed humanity. And the father she had vilified was not a villain. In the courtroom, Ms. Albright formally withdrew the contestation. Given the yachty information that has come to light, Your Honor, my client no longer objects to Mr. Davies acting as executor of his mother's will. Furthermore, Miss Davies wishes to apologize to the court for the misunderstanding that led to these proceedings. She looked at Lily, who nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. Lily stood up, her legs visibly trembling. And I want to apologize to my dad, she said, her voice cracking. She looked directly at me, her eyes filled with a torrent of emotions, regret, sorrow, and a fragile, nascent hope. I'm so sorry, Dad. I didn't know. I didn't know. My own carefully constructed composure crumbled. Tears I had held back for years streamed down my face. I could only nod, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. The courtroom, the judge, the legalities, it all faded into the background. In that moment, there was only me and my daughter. The chasm between us suddenly, miraculously, bridged by the loving, honest words of the woman we both missed so dearly. Judge Harrison, her expression softened, nodded understandingly. Case dismissed, she said gently. I suggest you two take all the time you need. As the courtroom emptied, Lily walked slowly towards me. She stopped, still clutching the letter. For a moment, we just stood there, the ghosts of years of pain and misunderstanding swirling around us. Then, hesitantly, she reached out a hand. I took it, my grip firm, reassuring. Her fingers, so like Clara's, curled around mine. Can we talk, Dad? She asked, her voice small. About Mom? About everything? Yes, Lilybug, I said, my voice thick with emotion, using the nickname Clara had penned, the nickname that felt like a key unlocking a door I thought was forever sealed. Yes, we can. We walked out of the courtroom together, hand in hand. The letter that had torn down the walls between us now, a sacred testament to a mother's love and a father's enduring patience. The path ahead wouldn't be easy. There were years of hurt to unpack, years of lost time to mourn. But for the first time in 6 long years, I felt a flicker of hope, a belief that we could rebuild. That Clara's last gift to us wasn't just a letter, but a second chance. The truth, however painful, had set us both free. Free from the shadows of the past, and free to, perhaps, find our way back to each other, guided by the unwavering light of a love that transcended even death. The silence had been broken, not by angry words or legal arguments, but by the quiet, powerful voice of truth, penned by a loving hand, delivered from beyond the veil. And as we stepped out into the uncertain light of day, I knew Clara was somewhere, smiling. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for your time. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe. It truly helps the channel. Click the video on screen, and I'll see you there.